Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Academic Research Exchange. I'm Marcy Collinson, Director of Worldwide Academic Research at Microsoft. In this session, Stefan Gary, Senior Solution Engineer for ParallelWorks, and Shailesh Sheno, Assistant Dean for Information Technology at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, share how their computing research is adopting a modern approach to deliver user-specific login nodes and elastic compute resources, supported by ParallelWorks solution Activate. If you have questions, you're welcome to submit them anytime during the presentation using the live meeting chat. Take it away, Stefan and Shailesh.
Thank you very much, Marcy, and thank you for this opportunity to present. My name is Stefan Gary, and I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer at ParallelWorks. My background is physical oceanography, and I use my scientific and teaching background to develop scientific workflows with ParallelWorks customers. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Shailesh Shenoy.
Hi, Stefan. How are you? Thanks so much for inviting me to participate in this. This is really exciting to talk about what we've been able to achieve together. My name is Shailesh Shenoy. I'm the Assistant Dean for Information Technology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. I'm the CIO and responsible for resources that include computation.
Thank you very much, Shailesh. So today, I think we're going to be presenting a very interesting synergy between Shailesh's vision for research computing at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, addressing what the specific user needs are at Albert Einstein, and how that vision matches the ParallelWorks Activate product, how it matches ParallelWorks Activate's modular architecture, and with the intention of showing that there's a very strong partnership between Albert Einstein College of Medicine and ParallelWorks. So we'll talk a little bit about the user needs at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and then we're going to go into how ParallelWorks is implemented, and then we'll discuss the specific implementation steps of how we installed and use ParallelWorks at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Then we'll move to a short demonstration of the user experience on Activate, and then wrap everything up with a Q&A.
The College of Medicine is composed of basically degree-granting programs, students earning an MD or a PhD in the biomedical sciences, for example, neuroscience, cell biology, biochemistry, or a combined MD, PhD. And being a research-intensive institution means that we have a large cohort of individuals who are NIH-funded biomedical researchers. So we have over 250 laboratories that are funded. And so much of the work here depends on being able to do computation. So one of the resources that we provide to our faculty and to our students and researchers is a compute cluster that's composed of 84 compute nodes, 14 GPU nodes, and about 16 petabytes of storage. We can accommodate 50 to 100 simultaneous users in the cluster. And the idea here, of course, is we want to make this system as easy to use as possible. We want to make sure it's accessible to the community so that they can enable their research. And we want to make sure that they have competitive advantage in being able to do their work, study their hypotheses, and do so very rapidly in a highly capable environment. So one of the challenges that we had early on was individuals needed to know how to access a compute cluster using command line interfaces or knowing how to specifically run scheduling commands. And that's not always something that is natural for somebody who's a biomedical researcher. And it sometimes can impede or create friction in being able to get work done. So one of the opportunities we saw was to work with a partner that could bring an easier to use interface to the front end, something that was more intuitive and more modern. And we were able to achieve this in working with the folks at ParallelWorks.
Great. Thank you very much, Shailesh. And in particular, ParallelWorks Activate was deployed at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine to run on the cluster. And Parallel Works Activate is special because it provides a single control plane across many different sites. So it's hybrid. It can be on-premise or on cloud. And it's this control plane for the resources that are available to users. So the compute resources, their clusters, wherever they are. And these resources are managed and in the same control plane as the workflows are. So that's basically where jobs are run are the resources, and what users do are the workflows. And both of these are in the same place. I think a big part of the presentation here that we're going to move to is to talk about how the structure of the vision at Albert Einstein College of Medicine matches the underlying architecture of Parallel Works. And this synergy is what's making our collaboration very strong and worthwhile.
So one of the keys to the success for a researcher at Einstein who wants to leverage the compute environment is to make sure that the resources are not only easy to access, but also ubiquitous, so that people can access these resources. Anyone in the lab can do so, of course, from either on or off campus as easily as possible. So one of the things that we provide the individuals here are personal, persistent login nodes. So basically, these are powerful enough for them to do some basic analysis and then to use, as a submit host in the compute cluster. They don't have to use that terminology because we've taken care of that behind the scenes. But that's essentially what the device will do. So whether someone wants to use a Jupyter notebook or someone wants to do some other type of analysis, they have a single pane that they go to be able to get to that resource. Cluster.EinsteinMed is what it's called here. So what this does is it empowers our researchers to have that easy access and to know that everything is consolidated in the same place. What that does for us is abstract what's happening behind the scenes. Because we have a storage system with a single namespace, there's no need for people to know exactly where their data reside or where the actual compute is happening. So the compute can happen anywhere within our ecosystem, whether that's on-prem or in the cloud, and the data will follow appropriately. And I think that that's a really important component of what we've achieved using Activate, is this ability to abstract a lot of the detail that's really unnecessary for someone to have to know when all they're trying to do is an analysis. So in essence, what happens to our HPC cluster is it becomes an appliance. It becomes something that's to which somebody comes and they do their work without having to know what's happening under the covers necessarily. Of course, if someone wants to know what's happening under the covers, they could. But the idea here is to be able to obfuscate that in such a way that enables what they're doing. So this environment doesn't matter whether someone's doing large-scale work or individual work. Regardless of the nature of what they're doing, it all looks and feels the same. And I think that's a really important component of what we're trying to achieve for our community. And of course, as a research institution, especially an NIH-funded research institution, one thing that's really important for us is that we're able to share our findings with others so that the findings are searchable, reusable, and also, of course, that people can reproduce what we've done. And the easiest way that we have found with any computational method to be able to reproduce the work that we've done is to provide someone a container. So containerize the workflow, containerize the process that's happening, provide that out to the community, assign a DOI to it, for example. And what that does is it makes it a real quick start for anybody to take that container, put it into any environment that they want, and to reproduce what's happening. And that's one of the things that we're able to enable by using the Activate solution. So what this means now is that we're able to provide our community with this private containerized workspace, and that we're able to have workflows that automate the deployment of all the solutions that someone might need for their studies. And then what we also do is we use the workspaces to launch jobs on the compute cluster. So it's a springboard when needed into the compute clusters. And as I was mentioning before, we get this full integration with the file system and with all the authentication that's necessary happens at that very first screen. So internally, what we've done is reduce the friction and reduce the need for someone to have to know how all the different components within the system works. And I think not only does that make this easier to use, there's less support that we have to provide people when they're trying to leverage this. But it means that, once again, we've reduced the amount of friction necessary for people to be able to be successful. So we think that this provides, something that's really important to enable our community, but also to give them a competitive advantage. So there are, of course, other ways that people try to achieve some of this, and one of the is Open on Demand, which is a great resource, and really it's out in the community, and it's really so many people contribute to this in a really meaningful way. But I have to tell you, one of the issues that I have in running technology at Einstein is the amount of effort that it takes to be able to leverage so many different open source resources. And for us, it's very important to work with a resource that's curated and professionally supported. So without that, I don't have a way of knowing that I can have a reliable resource that's available for our community. And then what happens is that the solution itself becomes essentially like an experiment internally. It can take a lot of time to get things off the ground. And it can take a lot of time to keep the solution sustainable and to be able to achieve what people want. And there's not necessarily a very deep bench of individuals who can support it. Now, that's not to take away anything from the Open on Demand solution. It's quite nice. But the point here is that we get something that's even more robust, even more capable, and something that I know is always on. And I feel that from my perspective, the ability to be able to work with a partner who can help us achieve this goal is really important. I don't have to have a staff of individuals who know how to knit together the solution. And what that does is it lowers the overall cost associated with being able to provide this important resource. I like to say over and over again, as a leader, it doesn't matter what vision you have, the strategy, if you can pull together the resources, if you can get consensus on building a solution. If you don't have the right partner with whom to work, you really don't have anything. And I feel that it's a key element of what we've been able to succeed, how we've been able to succeed with Activate, is this ability to leverage a strong partnership to make sure that folks can succeed. So if we take a look at how it is that we deploy the solution in our environment, of course, Rome was not built in a day. So what we have to do first is start with just standing it up. So just stand up the Activate solution within our conventional Slurm cluster. And then once that started, we had a need to be able to provide similar analysis, in fact, the same concept, but leveraging data that contains sensitive data, sensitive information, PHI, PII. And so all of those data are in a separate enclave, isolated from the rest of our compute environment. And as a result, what we did is we created a separate environment just for that experience, using data sets that were in some way protected or had a special data use agreement. Once we had that going, and once the community started leveraging that, we were able to extend to our OpenShift cluster. And the OpenShift cluster was our basically opportunity to be able to leverage containers, Kubernetes containers, within a single plane. And all of that is hosted in such a way that the containers become the native way that folks can package their work and make it available to their colleagues, make it available to the scientific community for others to use. And then what happens when we get into this mode is now we can take these personalized user workspaces, which used to be virtual machines, and we can replace them with containers. And that's what we're able to do completely within the Activate environment. So then as we leverage the next step of sophistication and maturity within the use of the product in our environment, what we're doing is we're moving to being able to use container native jobs within the environment, and then also leveraging the cloud. And Stefano, it would be wonderful if you could talk a little bit about how we achieve that within our environment.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Shailesh. By this idea of progression and basically starting off with containerization kind of hidden from the user in a sense, where like the user workspaces are being provided to the users as containers. And then with the idea, when we transition from walk to run, it's like we're now making containerization almost explicitly available to the users, and by it opens the door for them to see and interact with containers in a more transparent way, to then further the goal for open science and reproducibility. So, and two ways to do that are by exposing the Kubernetes provider within Activate. That allows users to kind of go directly to the underlying Kubernetes environment for sending out their jobs, but also when they send out their jobs, they're doing it through containers, and so they can ensure that their work is reproducible. And then another approach is to then, alongside that Kubernetes provider, is still sort of the traditional resources that users are used to seeing, which would be the access that they've been the access to the cluster, the Slurm cluster that they've been seeing before, is still in that same place. So those two modalities remain available to the users depending on what they're comfortable with and what they would like to do for their science. And then the final step in the run is to leverage Activate's idea of a single control plane for all resources. So when it comes time for researchers to add cloud resources, those cloud resources appear right alongside the on-premise resources. So when we talk about the OpenShift cluster or the Kubernetes provider, those are on-premise resources. And then if there's research need, then cloud clusters can appear right alongside them, and they have the same user experience as the on-premise resources.
And Stefan, this is really powerful, right? This ability to abstract out the different compute environments so that individuals don't need to necessarily know how to leverage each one. They don't have to know how to get their data to each location, how to make sure that they're going to get a consistent experience. And that's something that I think is so important, is what Activate has been able to enable us, is this consistent experience with an on-prem or a cloud environment, so that we can really achieve this hybrid cloud environment. And in our case, when we need to burst for capacity in the cloud. So I think, once again, this is really powerful, and something that we should not, I think, underestimate is how that ease of use enables people to be able to leverage the resource without having to be concerned about the speed bumps or the obstacles, the friction of being able to know how to actually do it. And of course, for us, what's very important is that we are able to maintain now that boundary, right? That cyber secure boundary. We know that everything is consistent with how we want things to operate. So we don't have people out there trying to do things on their own. And because we provided them with a very clear way to be able to achieve this. I think that's very important.
And further to your point, Shailesh, and just to be very, very clear, when users when they need to use cloud resources, they never see the cloud console, right? The guardrails are in place so that it's a very straightforward graphical user interface to configure cloud compute resources or cloud storage resources. And all of those compute and storage resources are integrated with each other, but they're not. They don't have to go directly to the console here. They go through a much narrower control panel or dashboard, if you will, that has a lot more guardrails, but is also much more specific to the research needs of scientists, as opposed to cloud developers that need a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's really key here. So, what I think would be interesting is, Stefan, if you could talk a little bit about how it is that you integrated this within the environment.
Absolutely. So, this schematic shows the major components of ParallelWorks Activate, and how we're able to keep things modular. The platform services, if you will, are in the top portion of the diagram, and that involves 3 nodes that are sort of a database node, the main service node that displays the web page, and then most importantly, a user node that within it has these user workspaces that are like the containerized environment where users can launch workflows, where they can connect to resources, and where they can keep a centralized location for their files. And for the case for the Albert Einstein cluster in particular, is that these user workspaces they mount directly to the user's home directories on their cluster. So all of these nodes are on premises. You have to log in to get through a special connection to get to the on-premise environment. So all of this is isolated away, and fully integrated with the cluster file system. The user nodes, or the workspaces that the users have, connect to the cluster through SSH connections, and that's the very bottom part of the diagram is the actual the worker nodes, or like the high performance computing. That's where the numbers are being crunched and the simulations are being run. And this right now, user workspaces are connecting directly to that cluster. They're submitting jobs to the Slurm queue, and they're using the resources. But this cluster, you can add cloud clusters right alongside it. So you can have multiple clusters connect back to the user environment.
Stefan, what I like about this architecture is its simplicity and the way that it's easy to sustain and is scalable. So I really appreciate understanding more about how you put this together. I think it would be really great to see how this works to the front end, and maybe you can do a demonstration of this environment for us.
Thank you very much, Shailesh. I'd be happy to.
In this demonstration of ParallelWorks Activate, I'm going to use two clusters. One of them is an Azure cloud cluster, and the other one is an on-premise cluster. And I'm going to demonstrate working with remote desktop sessions and Jupyter notebooks on the two clusters. This first page here is the landing page for my account on the Activate platform. This is displayed in a web browser, and this particular instance of ParallelWorks Activate is our general shared tenant platform for a commercial offering. The Albert Einstein College of Medicine's dedicated deployment is nearly identical to what you can see here, except that it's customized to the specific needs of the College of Medicine, and also has changes in branding. On my landing page, there are two clusters that are already up and running. That's in the upper left corner, the tile, my compute tile. And so the compute tile consolidates all of my resources, basically where I'm going to run jobs. Then the beautiful thing about Activate is it consolidates where you run with what you run. And so to the right of the compute clusters are the workflows that I have accessible on my account. And so some types of workflows are pure number crunching, like the benchmarks workflow. However, there are other workflows. Since a workflow is simply a series of programmed repeated steps, other workflows, for example, the desktop session or the Jupyter Lab session, they can establish a connection a graphical connection between one of the clusters and my workspace. And so whether it's a series of purely computational steps that are automated, or whether it's a series of steps that are necessary to establish a graphical connection, both of those are workflows. The workflows that are available here are just a small subset of total workflows that can be either shared through a marketplace on the ParallelWorks platform. And so there, users can publish workflows where they can use existing templates that we provide. Furthermore, users can also configure their own workflows using an easy-to-use YAML framework. For the clusters themselves, they are easily configurable. And so with the on-premise cluster, for example, all I need to do is specify an IP address, and a username, and a couple other parameters. On the Azure Cloud Cluster, here I have a near real-time trace of my usage on that machine, as well as a simplified graphical user interface for how to configure that cluster. Some of these parameters I can configure on the fly while the cluster is running. Other parameters are set once the cluster has been started. But the key point is that the users never go to the Azure Cloud Console directly. Here they have a user interface that has really only the options that would be necessary for a high-performance computing researcher to specify the size and shape of a compute cluster that they would need for their jobs. So, for example, things like the instance type or the region, and a lot of the other complexity associated with cloud computing is abstracted away from the user. So, with both of my clusters connected, now I'm going to move from the compute resources to the workflows, to what I actually want to do. So, for example, to start a remote desktop session, all I need to do is select from a drop-down box which of my two active clusters I want to run the remote desktop session on, and it will auto-populate however many active clusters I have in this box. Once I've selected where I want to run and a few other parameters, I then click the execute button and the session will start. In my sessions dashboard, in the lower left portion of my screen, I can see that I have two running desktop sessions, one on each cluster, and two running Jupyter Lab sessions. Starting a Jupyter Lab instance is very similar to starting a remote desktop session, as I just demonstrated a short minute ago. However, there are a few more configuration options. For example, to access my remote desktop, I can click on the link, and here I've been working with a data set inside the ParaView three-dimensional data visualization software, and everything that I'm doing here and the manipulations that I'm doing are running on the desktop of the head node of the Azure Cloud Cluster. So it is as if the cluster were my desktop right in front of me, except the graphics from that head node are being piped through the Activate platform to my computer, to the browser that's running on my computer. I can also take a look at the running Jupyter Lab instance. This again is the Jupyter Lab running on my Azure cluster. And so I can do all sorts of wonderful things like starting up a notebook. I can ask where I am. Maybe I can do some really important work. In this case, I'm just going to generate a unique ID so that just as a sort of placeholder for actual code and working. I'm going to save the notebook as a file. And to show that the two clusters are integrated together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this Jupyter notebook from where I am now, which is on the Azure cluster, and I'm going to transfer it to my on-premise cluster, the other cluster that I have connected to the platform. So I verified that I've saved it. So I'm going to go back to my home page. Again, the notebook was on the Azure cluster, and I'm going to move it to the on-premise cluster. The editor portion of the platform shows that there's three important things happening here. Inside this IDE, I have my own personal workspace, which is the equivalent of this personal workspace is the equivalent of the user login nodes on the Albert Einstein College of Medicine deployment. In this particular scenario, this is a containerized workspace where all of my files are available. And within this workspace, I can also mount the home directories of my two clusters. And so I have the Azure cluster and the on-premise cluster are mounted. And if I drop down, I can quickly see that my demonstration notebook from the Azure cluster is available. But my on-premise cluster doesn't have that notebook yet. So if I move it over, I've now copied the demonstration notebook, or I've now moved the demonstration notebook over to my on-premise machine, or my on-premise connection. And if I go back to my Home tab, I can now access the Jupyter Lab instance that's running on the on-premise machine. And here's that notebook that I just copied over. And you can see that the information that I've saved in the notebook has been retained. But if I want to verify that I've actually changed computers, I'm on a different computer now. And again, I can save my work and move it back and forth as needed.
The desktop and Jupyter Lab applications that I just demonstrated are only a very small subset of applications that can be run on the Activate platform. And this just goes to show the tremendous flexibility that users have when configuring their resources, but also configuring their workflows and running workflows. There's also the potential for sharing workflows within organizations. And it's that ability to share and collaborate that helps accelerate scientific workloads.
So, Stefan, I think what this shows once again is the versatility of the platform, the ability for it to be hybrid cloud, and also the options for us to be able to cover so many different capabilities. One of the things I think is useful is for us to just take a look at all the different applications that we've used at Einstein. And so if we take a look at those applications, we've got the array of them, from Jupyter Notebooks to GUI-based applications, and of course the large-scale simulations. And all of these can be leveraged from within the same interface. And I feel like that's, once again, brings some familiarity to people when they want to leverage a different tool, and also ease of use without individuals having to necessarily know how to leverage the command line interface to be able to use the HPC resources. So what we've done is really taken and once again abstract out what's behind the Activate interface in a way that makes all of this more like an appliance and less like something that someone has to be really well skilled in to be able to operate well. So for me, the partnership has been very meaningful because of the way that we've been able to enable our population. And I feel that the steps that we're taking next to even broaden the way that we leverage containers and the way that we leverage a hybrid cloud is going to mean that we're going to be able to provide even more success for our teams. So I really want to thank Stefan and all the folks at Parallel Works for what you've done to make this happen.
Well, thank you very much, Shailesh. It's a pleasure to work with you and see what we can do together, because it's this synergy of what your users need, matching how the platform has been architectured. Those have grown together over time, and it's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, it is indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan and Shailesh, and thank you all for attending this session of the Microsoft Academic Research Exchange. We hope you found this presentation insightful and that you'll join us for the next event. Please look for an email in the coming weeks announcing the speaker and program details. Hope to see you soon.